Ernie, welcome to Shaboom.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. This is episodes all about fathers and Father's Day. And when I introduced you as not only a great player and a coach and a great human being, but you're a great daddy. You're a great daddy. I have always loved being around your children and your relationship with your children. And now you get to be even better. You get to be a granddaddy, right?
Hey, I've got 8 grandkids, 7 and under, and that is the joy. That is the best ever.
That, it really is better than being a dad. Being a granddaddy, I tell everybody, because there's no rules.
You get to spoil them all you want.
It's so good.
And they just love being around you. That's the best thing, too.
Well, listen, you're from Rockford, Illinois. Let me start with your dad. Tell me about your dad.
My dad worked at Chrysler for, I would say, 30 plus years. I remember when I had my first son, I called him because at the same age, he had his 6th son. And I said, how did you do this? 7 straight boys and then 3 straight girls. And we're all, within 1.5, 2 years apart from each other. So all I remember is here's a man that worked 4 or 5 jobs to feed all of us. Wasn't around a lot because he had to make ends meet, and he worked so hard. So you didn't have a great father-son relationship because you didn't spend a lot of time with him, but yet at the same sense, he gave you a sense of how hard you had to work to survive, to be successful. And I always used to ask, could I ever work as hard as he worked? Because it just scared me how much he had to work. And sure enough, I ended up working just as hard, if not harder, than when he worked. So the lesson was taught there along the way.
Yeah, what a great role model. Let me ask you this, Ernie. Were your relatives part of the Great Migration, that came out of the South and went, north to work in the factories? Did your dad's family come from some place?
Yes. They all came up from Tennessee, and my mom's side was Mississippi. So yes, they all had that vision of coming north to find better jobs and all of those things. And I look back and look at pictures of my mom and dad and then their mom and dad, and they certainly didn't have much at all, and were certainly part of a migration because they literally came up here with just the clothes on their backs to start a family in Rockford, Illinois, and where we were all established at.
It's really interesting to think back how foreign it is today, but for your dad to have worked at the same place that number of years, I mean, that just doesn't happen in our lives today, where you have that kind of longevity in a job.
Not in one job. I mean, you could do the same profession and jump around in different areas, but I'll never forget coming back from college and going to Belvedere, Illinois, the Chrysler plant where he worked. And the most impressive thing to me was to walk in, and majority men were in the plant, but how much they felt connected to him. And all of them came up and said, what a great dad you have. What a great guy. What a great man. And it was surprising to see, wow, that's another whole environment that we're not in, that he's in every day with friends and guys that he were close to that worked on the assembly line, and he was a painter, so they would mask up and go paint cars and do all of that. So, but it was very impressive to see how all of those men responded to him and how much respect they had for him as well.
Let me ask you this. I know you got 2 boys, Marcus and Jordan, and you got a girl, Mackenzie. When you coached in Saudi Arabia, did you have kids then?
I did not. All 3 of my kids were born overseas in Saudi Arabia, so ended up with dual citizenships up until age 21, where everything switched to be nationalized, obviously Americans and that. But it was a fascinating experience having kids abroad.
Wow, that is very fascinating. Charlotte has a good friend whose husband was in the Navy. He was a Navy aviator, and all of his kids were born in one in Italy, one in Japan,
Yes.
one in Spain, as they were doing the tour. So that is pretty fascinating. I think one of the great joys of being a dad is watching your kids grow up and the successes that they have. Talk a little bit about all 3 of your kids, because they've all they've all done great things and continue to do great things.
You know, when kids are little and you're in a profession that requires you to be away from them, and I think any successful man, be it in coaching or corporate world, you're on the road a lot and you're away from your family a lot, and you need that strong woman at home to help raise those kids. And you know, my wife at the time did a great job. But the thing I remember was trying to bring my kids into my environment. So at a very young age, they became ball boys and ball girls, so they could see what dad does. And at the same time, when dad went to work, they would come to work with me on game nights. So all the way back at St. Mary's, where I had my first head coaching job. And even prior to that, they were ball boys and ball girls a little bit at Stanford when I worked for Coach Montgomery moving forward. But it was neat to see them. And the thing that I noticed, particularly with my boys, they really locked in and understood what you were doing and trying to do. And of course, my daughter became a cheerleader. My sons ended up playing for me for about a couple of years. And then one son became a manager. One son decided to go play football, believe it or not, and track and all of those things. So it was neat having them around in the environment. So the fact that you were on the road so much, at least when you were home, they would come by practice. They would show up at all the games. They were actually working the games as you coached the game. And I thought that really helped us just in terms of bonding together and them understanding why dad was gone so much and still stayed connected to dad, because when dad was in town, they were going to work with dad.
And then I'm making an assumption that they had a relationship with your players because they were part of the fabric of the team too. And it's almost like they had another 15 older brothers that would look after them too, which is kind of neat.
Well, it was really neat. And I think two things happened with that. Number one, they saw individuals from several different backgrounds and social economic backgrounds, and they saw them develop coming in the door as skinny freshmen and then going out as grown men ready to, you know, move on with their lives. And I think that was very important for them to see that. And then along the way, and when I started coaching my boys, I'll never forget this. I remember coming back to the locker room, feeling like I had a tough practice, and I didn't tell my sons goodbye. And I walked in and I hugged my sons. And as I looked around the locker room, all eyes were on you. And it was at that point in time back at St. Mary's, I realized, you know, some of these young men didn't have dads in their lives. So then, therefore, it helped me understand why I had to become dad to them as well, too, because they really looked at your relationship, and I think they really fed off of that. And in some cases, wish they had that relationship with some of these young men not knowing their dad at all. So that was a very important part of my coaching development, to understand and I had to do more than just be a coach. Now, all of a sudden, underneath the hat of coach, you had to be dad, some cases mom, brother, friend, partner, all of those things that young people need in this day and age.
Well, you really became, like you said, a father figure to so many of your players. And I know you spent almost as much time on life lessons as you did on X's and O's. You know, you took it as a responsibility that you were trying to raise good men, and that men were going to go out and maybe not do the things that their fathers did, that they were going to be involved with the lives of their children. They were going to go their way and have a relationship with that. And I know one of the things that you did that I always found intriguing was you would have a retreat with your players, kind of a bonding retreat, but it also was about, I think, a little bit about these life lessons. Talk about that and how that came about.
When I came back from Saudi Arabia, I was out of the country for 7 years. And when you came back, and I went into an environment with Boyd Grant at Colorado State, was lucky and blessed enough to get that job with him. But one of the things I noticed that instantly, if you want to know how this country operates and how to appreciate it more, just leave for 7 years. And when you came back, I saw when I left, it was like the John Travolta disco music age, telling my age a little bit. But then when I came back, it was rap music age. So that completely changed our society. And then walking into a locker room environment where at Colorado State, there were several of those players that did not have men in their lives, dads, let alone men, but no dads in their lives either. And I remember going to Boyd Grant and saying, you know, there's something we need to do to kind of bring all this together. And that's where I had this vision as an assistant coach that this goes beyond coaching X's and O's. And you really have to understand what makes young people tick. And to do that, you've got to really get into their lives. So in my first head coaching job at St. Mary's, one of the things that I had learned from Roland and Sharon Todd, I went to a coaching workshop and they talked about just how you really become transparent with your players, get into their lives, get to know and understand the importance of all of that. So we would go on retreats, and we call them part of our self-improvement program. And on these retreats, we would deal with not only the basketball aspect, how many minutes, starters, how do you handle all of those things, but then we got into their lives. Let's do an opportunity to really interview each other, get to know each other. And it really took taking young people and going back as far as possible in their lives and say, tell me about your great-grandparents, your grandparents, your mom and dad, brothers and sisters. So when you talk about putting a hand in the huddle and saying family, well, really, you don't know an individual. You might know what their high school accolades were and all of that. But when you started getting into their lives and finding out there was a lot of death in their families, there was a lot of grieving that didn't take place, there was a lot of anger because they didn't have relationships with that opened up another whole avenue of coaching to really bond your players, grow your players. And certainly after getting that intimate into their lives, now you do feel a real sense that you really know somebody and they really know you, which allows your teams to perform at a higher level because you had more trust and togetherness there. I think that's a big aspect that coaches missed early on. My coach was a Marine drill sergeant. We didn't have a relationship with him. We had a lot of fear with there, and that's something you didn't need at that time, particularly trying to get me to play for you and everything. So it really kind of changed the course because I remember the NCAA reaching out and saying, how do you get these young people to go through this program where you do dress for success, you're eating etiquette, study skills, testing anxiety, how to handle yourself in an interview. All of those things came into play as we taught. And sure enough, kids bonded and they became what I would say much more successful coming out of our programs, particularly those that didn't have an opportunity to further their basketball careers.
I had a chance recently to film a television series that we're filming about America 250 called United Taste of America. And we went to one of the great historically black restaurants in New Orleans, Dookie Chase, that was, I mean, I got to go sit in a room where Dr. King sat and Thurgood Thomas and Thurgood Marshall, I mean, and you know, John Lewis and Andrew Young and all this. And it was really, but one of the things when they established this restaurant back in the late 1940s, they taught etiquette. And they still do that today. They bring in junior high school groups because they said, you don't know what spoon to use or what fork to use. And I told them the story of the things that you had done because you want people to never be embarrassed. You want to put them in a position where, because then you lose confidence in your life. And so, you know, having the college experience is more than just going to class. It's really learning how to navigate life and navigate society.
Well, and that's what I found out coming from Rockford, Illinois, and going to Eugene, Oregon. And I always tell athletes, you don't only learn about something in a classroom. There's an education within an education when you go to these campuses. So as I was going out in the community and having home away from home with families, Catholic families, Jewish families, you learn so much. And that here you are sitting at a dinner table and you're not knowing what spoon, what fork, what knife to pick up because you were never taught those things in my home. We just had a pot of beans and a spoon. Get your plate and go outside and eat. So I took my experiences, what I didn't know and what I felt uncomfortable in, and made sure that, okay, I'm a head coach now. I'm going to educate players in terms of what you need to know to not only function as a student athlete, but later on in life. These things are going to be extremely important because here's the things I learned that sitting at the dinner tables of corporate America. My parents were not corporate America. They were factory workers. But as I went away to college, I sat at the table of corporate America and watched how they functioned and how they handled their families. And it was a huge learning experience.
You know, Ernie, one of the things I'm fascinated by is how many of your siblings went to college. I mean, that was rare.
It was very rare. And actually, I was the first one to go away to college out of 10 kids. And I have a couple of sisters now that have followed behind me and everything. But that's because as parents, my mom had a 6th grade education. My dad had an 8th grade education. Coming out of Mississippi and Tennessee, that wasn't a priority. It was work and how you contribute. And they made sure, though, everybody in that family, all 10 of those kids, at a very young age, you had to have a job. I don't care if it was shoveling snow in the wintertime, delivering papers, cutting grass. You had to work. So they did teach you how to work, but the academic piece was missing in their lives. Therefore, it was not a big impact on us to go away and go to college. So when I had the opportunity to do that, I certainly then could reach back and grab some of my younger siblings and bring them forward in understanding the importance of a college education.
You know, Ernie, you told me this story once before that I found fascinating. You told me that you would take your freshman boys and take them to the maternity ward to let them understand, hey, where babies come from and the consequences of babies. Talk a little bit about that. That is genius, I think.
Well, I was involved with the Children's Miracle Network, their honorary chair in Eugene there. And when I went into the neonatal intensive care unit, bingo, I said, oh, here's a great opportunity for young men to understand the responsibilities of bringing a child into this world. So part of our self-improvement program was to get them dressed up, cap, gown, clean their hands, and go into the neonatal intensive care and hold these babies. I mean, babies that could really fit in the palm of their hand with all these tubes connected to them. And it was a reality as to the responsibilities you have down the road towards raising kids, if you're going to have kids. So it was genius in one sense, but in the other sense, I wanted them to understand, you know, this is going to be you one day as a dad. This could be your child sitting here. And certainly it was obviously an opportunity for them to understand too the responsibilities they had right then as college student athletes.
When I was in graduate school at Georgia State, I had 2 jobs, and one of my jobs was I worked at Scottish Rite Children's Hospital on the weekends, what we call the graveyard shift, 11 to 7, Friday and Saturday nights. So after teaching school all day on Friday, I didn't go to bed. I stayed up all night, and I worked in what they called purchase accounting, which was a glorified title for the guy that stocked all the shelves. But one of the things I got to do at like 3 a.m. was feed the preemies. I would go, and the nurses, I got to know the nurses, and I would go film. And this was the Reagan era of the AIDS babies. We had a lot of those babies that were born with AIDS, and they were even smaller, you know, because they were, so many of them were premature, way premature births. But you're right, you know, they fit in your palm of your hand. But that was made such an impact, and I'm sure this made a big impact on your kids that maybe many of them said, I'm not ready to be a daddy.
You know, and part of that was the intent, but the other part was, again, understanding here you are, these college student athletes on this side of town, sitting on that hospital on the other side of town are babies that are literally struggling to stay alive, and understanding the balance and all of that and what that meant. And, you know, as you go through self-improvement program, you go through the stuff you try to teach your student athletes. I'll never forget something my son told me, my oldest son, Marcus. He came back, and he, after graduating and being out of college, he walked into the locker room. We were in a big NCAA tournament game. I remember him telling me, Dad, I felt bad for some of the guys because they have yet to learn the lessons you were teaching in terms of how to handle yourself in those things. So he said, I want to take this opportunity to reach out to you. And he wrote this in this huge letter to me. And he said something I'll never forget. He goes, I always thought life lessons were to be taught in the living room, but instead you taught them in the locker room. And how much I appreciate that and understand that now. So as we did the self-improvement programs, the neonatal intensive care, all of those things, how to dress for success, your eating etiquette, all of that around basketball really gave them an opportunity for later on in life when they now become dads. They have a better understanding, better platform to raise their kids from.
Well, and you look at your kids now with their own kids. I mean, that's part of the legacy is they saw what a good daddy looked like. And and want to emulate that behavior for their kids. But the fact that you're involved with your grandchildren, I think is so, so important, because I think grandparents play a different role. And talk a little bit about that. You know, you're in a position now where you have some time to spend with them differently than you had with your own children when they were little. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, I use the phrase, you know, I've been in college basketball or coaching for, it was like 34 years. In 34 years, I helped raise somebody else's kids while somebody helped me raise my kids. My pastor, my barber, professor that was involved in their lives when I was not there. Now I get an opportunity to help raise my grandkids. So now you get to be kind of like almost like dad all over again, because and you're a better dad because you only can focus on them now. You don't have the distractions of having to coach and deal with boosters and recruiting and all that. You are locked in when you have those grandkids with you of being a dad. And it is the best feeling ever to devote all of your time around them. When they come visit, it's like Disneyland here. You bring out the toys, the bikes, the swimming pools available for them. And I enjoy seeing them come, and they enjoy coming to see Papa.
Well, with Ryan, I felt guilty. I was gone too much. I mean, you're building a career. I mean, the number of times I was gone, I missed a lot. And when he had a little boy, I said, I'm not missing this. I'm not missing anything. And I remember having a good friend who worked for me at one time, and he missed his child's kindergarten graduation. And I called him in and said, if you ever do this again, I'm going to fire you. Well, I was trying to do my job. I said, I know you were, but you don't get that day back.
Exactly.
You don't get it back. And so I'm the guy going to all the ridiculous things that 3-year-old preschool does. I'm right in the front row. I'm gonna make sure he sees me there, and I'm letting him know that whatever they're doing today, if they're singing one song, I'm gonna be there to do that. If he's gonna go to soccer camp, I'm gonna be right there on the sidelines and that kind of thing. And I know you're doing the same thing right now.
Yeah, and that's an awesome feeling. Even with my kids living afar, I still have an opportunity to bring them to me, go visit them now and spend time. The key thing, though, is when you do have them with you, you are 100% focused on those grandkids because you don't have all the other distractions of working a job and doing those things. And that is a neat place to be.
Ernie, I want to close by talking about a project that you're doing that, hey, I'm so proud of you for doing it, but it's such a need. You've been involved in helping largely African-American coaches and African-American men get tested for prostate cancer. The statistics are alarming. More African-American men die of prostate cancer than all other ethnicities combined, and it is a treatable disease if you catch this disease early. Talk about what you've been doing at the Final Four and why that's been meaningful and gratifying.
Prostate cancer, particularly among African American men, is the number 2 killer, pushing number 1 killer. 1 in every 9 men are going to get it. 1 in every 4 or 5 African American men are going to have prostate cancer at some point in time in their life. Knowing several coaches that have gone through it, several ex-NBA players and coaches as well have gone through it, it would be shocking to you the who's who are on that list, be it an athlete, movie star, whatever, that have gone through prostate cancer. Men do not like to step on that platform and talk about this like a woman would talk about going through breast cancer and everything. So what I've tried to do is open up that avenue to communication that, hey, this is all right to talk about. And you need to talk about it because as men, we're afraid to go to the doctors. African-American men are really afraid to go to the doctors because of the Tuskegee Institute experiment went on back here. My parents never took us to doctors because they didn't trust
doctors.
The doctor.
No,
and
right.
With prostate cancer, I've lost teammates. I've lost the president of a university. I've lost my dad. And you do not have to die of prostate cancer. It's like 99% treatable if you catch it early enough. And there is the key. So what we've started to do here, having gone through it, I partnered with my doctor in the Mayo Clinic here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we literally go to churches because at the churches, you have your men's groups. So the men are already there. And we would go to African-American churches. We would go to churches of several different nationalities. And what we tried to do then is partner with them to say, hey, let me bring the doctors, the nurses to you. There's a company out of Austin, Texas called I'm Aware that has a little portable testing kit that literally all it takes is a prick of the finger, smear blood, and you can get your PSA number within 48 hours. That's the indicator now that, hey, you might want to go see your doctor. So we've tested in the last 4 years about 650 men now going to several different churches. We did 255 coaches at the Final Four when it was here in Phoenix a couple of years ago. And through that, we've probably have saved the lives of about 30 men whose numbers were so out of whack and they had not been in, yet all the signs were there and they were still afraid to go to a doctor, and now getting them in to see a doctor and putting them on a program to hopefully save their lives down the road as well, too.
I love your structure where either in a church setting or at the Final Four, put a little peer pressure on the guy. If you're seeing your buddy getting the blood test, you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna step up and do it too.
Well, you and I know a lot of these coaches, so it's like, well, I don't know. Give me your phone. Let me call your wife. And then when I get the wife on the phone, baby, go get that test right now. So it was a great environment to see friends at the Final Four, coaches that you know, and be able to help them in this way. So I'm happy that we're able to do it. We will continue to target Final Fours, maybe even NBA All-Star game. I think it would be great because you find a lot of African-American men at those events as well, too. And usually players will bring their entourage to the events. So there's some open areas really to get after to get more men tested. But it's just kind of my give back through all of this, and then having a platform that let me get up and talk to you about this and help you understand the need and the importance of getting tested.
Well, I am some connective tissue here. The things that you did with your players, and then this. Men fight intimacy. We build walls. We don't talk. Like I'll come home from some place and Charlotte say, "What did you talk about?" Well, nothing. She goes, "That's such a guy thing. You be with a guy 4 hours, you didn't talk about anything." A woman in 4 hours, we would have talked about everything. But the health issue, again, you have to be willing to share that story. And women do share the story. I had breast cancer. I've been treated.
Yes.
Men kind of, it's that place. And we're all like, I don't want to talk about that. The stigma.
We do, which is why so many men have probably passed away unnecessarily because they refuse to open up intimacy and talk about that. Getting back to my players, this is one of the areas we dealt with them on. We call it what's in your backpack. What is it that you carry around with you that shame, guilt, fear, paranoia, and how to let go of all that, how to empty out your backpack. And it required them at the end of 48 hours of being together, having fun, picking at each other, to sit in front of their teammates, coaches too, and talk about what we fear, what's in that backpack we carry around. All men need to empty out their backpack because they carry a lot of guilt, shame, fear, paranoia. And that's the intimacy part you talk about, where women have an ability to really open up and get to know each other. You put two women at a table over lunch that don't know each other, I'll guarantee you within an hour, they know the kid's name, the doctor at the hospital that gave birth. You put two men together, it's going to be, who won the game last night? And that's about it. That's the instinct of the conversation.
You're absolutely right about that. Well, this show is all about our generation, baby boomers, and you're still doing stuff. What's high on your bucket list that you still want to try to accomplish?
I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to accomplish is what I'm doing is helping other men, because I think we're given these platforms when you go through coaching and the success you have, and all of a sudden you get to the end. Yes, it's important for me now to spend time with my grandkids, but I'm also trying to look around and say, okay, where can I reach back and open doors for other people, give some of that knowledge, some of that assistance that they may need and may not even know they need it. So as part of that, is people say, well, what do you do in retirement? People tell me you don't do anything, you sit around. I said, no, you can be as busy as you want to be. It's just you have an opportunity now to really give back and have some profound impacts on the lives. I've chosen to do it with men, and particularly men who have dealt with a lot of fear and guilt in their lives, how to let go of that and get in and get tested.
Well, you get to a point in your life, I think, where being successful is not as important as being significant.
Very good point. Yes.
Now you have this platform to be significant. Listen, Ernie, you're a great dad, a great granddad. You're a great friend, but you're a better person. You're a good man, and I appreciate you being with us today on Shaboom.
I appreciate you doing this. Love you, my brother.
Thank you, pal. Appreciate you.